Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you all here today. I guarantee you will not be disappointed for having come. My name is Doug Imlach. I'm a volunteer with the Yankee Air Museum, and it's my privilege and honor to be able to introduce tonight's speaker. World War II produced countless acts of bravery and courage, and usually we must either read a book or watch a movie to learn about them. Tonight we have the unusual opportunity to hear of an incredible life and a unique military career firsthand from the person who lived them. Steve Pisanos started in humble beginnings and as a young boy set a lofty goal for himself, which he not only attained, but took to incredible heights. His life story is something you can't make up. Briefly, he served in the RAF where he flew Spitfires. He flew in the 4th Fighter Group, number 71 Eagle Squadron, where he flew Mustangs and Thunderbolts. He was on the first escort mission to Berlin, escorting bombers. He attained the status of double ace. He fought with the French resistance. He was a test pilot. He had a distinguished career in Vietnam, and after that served as head of Air Force operations in Greece, where this all began. Along the way, in addition to numerous battle awards from the Brits and the US, France gave him the Croix de Guerre, and I learned last night when he got that he was kissed on both cheeks by Charles de Gaulle. And he also more recently received France's highest award, the Legion of Honor. Before I turn it over to Steve, there will be a brief question and answer session after he speaks. And for those of you who haven't already seen them, he has books, autographed copies of his books that he personally wrote, did not use a ghostwriter. With that, I'll turn it over to Steve Pisanos, the Flying Greek.
Thank you, Doc, for the splendid introduction. It is a pleasure indeed to be here in front of so many wonderful people to present part of my life story. I was born in Athens, Greece, and I came to this wonderful country in 1938. What a pleasure to really be an American. During the war, I was with the Royal Air Force in England, not an American citizen yet, but I had the honor and the pleasure to be naturalized as a US citizen, the first individual ever to become an American citizen outside the US continental limits. I was proud then, and I am proud now to be an American like you people. Don't let the politicians in Washington influence you about the country. This is the greatest country on this planet. America is a great nation, and we need to be proud about that. Let me then begin and tell you a little bit about my life story and how I found myself in this wonderful country. I was born in Athens, Greece. And at the age of 18, I got a job on a merchant ship that was headed for Oran, Algeria, and the next destination was Baltimore, Maryland. I had dreams, of coming to America, but I didn't know how to do it. And it was this journey that I took that finally convinced me to stay in this wonderful country, because I found America the greatest nation on earth. Funny, the authorities didn't like the idea that I had jumped ship in Baltimore, but they went ahead and said, hey, he said, go ahead and live wherever you want to live. You are free. I thought they were going to pick me up and send me back to the old country, but thank God, the guys at Ellis Island were so good to me, and I walked out of that fort as a free man. It was then when I joined the Royal Air Force, and after that, I transferred to the American Air Force, and finally, they naturalized me as a US citizen in London, England. And I happened to be the first individual to ever become a US citizen outside the continental limits. As I said earlier, I was proud then, and I am proud now. Let me tell you something about this wonderful country of ours. America, my friends, is the greatest nation on earth. It's helping other countries, as you know, and whenever there are problems in the world, who on earth is going there to help? Only the US. That's why I'm proud, and I want you to be proud, because this is the greatest nation, no doubt about that. I came from Athens, Greece, when I was 18 years old. I didn't know where to go when the freighter landed in Baltimore, Maryland. And finally, one of the crew members, he says, you need to go to New York, because that's where the Greek restaurants are, and you're going to find many Greeks. So I jumped on the train and found myself in New York City. This was 1938. I did not know a single word of English. The only thing I knew was when I went to the Baltimore railway station, and I had learned that from one of the crew members, to buy my ticket. And I told the guy, ticket for New York, like I knew exactly what I was talking about. My father had given me $6 American before I left Greece. Where he had found that money, I have no idea. But he gave it to me, and he said, son, you're going to America, you might need this money. And my God, they did come handy. Anyway, one of the first objectives I have when I really came to this wonderful country was to learn English. So I began to go to night school. And then later on, working in different restaurants and hotels. The war began in Europe, of course, and I tried to join the US Army. They will not take me because I was not an American. I told this husky sergeant at the recruiting office downtown New York, make me one. He says, no, he said, go become an American and come back here. Anyway, I didn't really get a chance to do that. So I joined the Royal Air Force. For your information, the Royal Air Force was in this country recruiting American civilian pilots without the knowledge of the American people. That's how some 800, 900 American boys joined the Royal Air Force. Anyway, I joined the Royal Air Force. I was sent to Polaris Flight Academy in Glendale to get some additional training, where I got about 90 hours on military aircraft. And from there, I went to England, and I began to fly Spitfires. I did strafing at the locomotives in France. But the Spitfire, you see, was a wonderful aircraft, but it didn't have the endurance to go to Berlin. It was later on when I transferred to the 4th Fighter Group, where we began to fly the P-47. But yet, though, that was not enough, because the generals, Spads, Doolittle, and others, they wanted the fighters to go to Berlin. So we finally got the P-51. This little wonderful machine here. I went to Berlin with this little bugger here. The Germans were really surprised to see us in Berlin. I had the honor of meeting Adolf Galland, the chief of the Luftwaffe Fighter Command, in one of our fighter reunions, fighter races reunions. And he told me, really, he says, I was in Berlin meeting with the Marshal, and when we were told that the Americans have arrived over Berlin with their fighter escorts and the B-17 behind me, I told the Marshal, we are kaput. And my God, Germany did kaput, no doubt about that. Anyway, my life story in this wonderful country is full of, I wouldn't say surprises, but I spent time at Wright Field. I went through the test pilot school there, and I took part on the testing of the YP-80, the first jet we had. I had a chance there to fly the Me-262, the FW-190, the Me-109, and the Zero. They were good aircraft, but America had the best. The P-38, the P-51, and so many other aircraft. And I tell you, I really enjoy my 30 years I spent in the U.S. Air Force. And the eastern part, after I spent time a year in Vietnam, I came back and I became deputy commander at a missile wing at Little Rock, Arkansas. Then one day I got a telephone call from a colonel. Pisanos? I said, yes, sir. How would you like to go to Athens, Greece, as chief of the Air Force mission there? Oh, I said, who is this? I said, you're pulling my leg. You know, me going to the place of my birth? No, he said, I'm not pulling your leg. But he said, I'm looking for a colonel, fighter pilot, who can speak Greek. And my guys told me that the only IBM card that pops out from the machine is Steve Pisanos. So anyway, I was really lucky, and I spent a tour, so close to 3 years, in the place of my birth. It was unbelievable. Although when I was there, I was dreaming about going to the Greek Air Force, but you know, I didn't have the ability, the grammatical ability, you know, to really pass any examination. That's why I left the country and I came here. So when the Greek Air Force found out that I was assigned to Athens, you have no idea the reception I had. And I did something that the Greeks still remember to this day. The French were trying to sell their Mirage aircraft to the Greek Air Force. The British, they were trying to sell their Jaguar. I had the responsibility to sell the F-4 Phantom. I went to St. Louis and I got some information from the factory there. And my God, when I came back to Athens, I went over to all the Greek Air Forces and briefed everybody. And then one time I had an appointment with the Prime Minister, this fellow Papadopoulos, and he wanted to know what aeroplane was this Phantom the Air Force wants to buy. Mr. Prime Minister, I said, it's one of the best aircraft. So then the decision was made to buy the Phantom, and that's what they fly today in the Greek Air Force. It was really wonderful to spend time in the old country, but the greatest thing, the thrill that has really come to my heart is this wonderful country, the United States of America, the greatest country on earth. And I think most of you know about it. I happen to be the individual who was naturalized as a US citizen in London, England in 1943. And I happen to be the first individual ever to become a US citizen outside the continental limits. There was a big celebration there. The old Ben Lyon and Babe Daniels, who were playing at the theater there, came to the ceremony, and it was so wonderful, and I still remember that reception I had. Anyway, I want you to know that America is the greatest nation on earth. We need to support, and don't let the politicians, change your mind. What I think we need to have in our hearts is America, the country, not the politicians, because as you know, the politicians, they play different games. Oh, we vote for them, there is no question about that. But America is the country that I really believe, and America is in my heart, and it always will be. Thank you very much. I'll be glad to thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have. Oh, okay. I was on my possibly sixth or seventh mission with this aircraft. We were flying first, of course, Spitfires, and then we converted to P-47s, and then they brought this wonderful machine here. And we had taken these fellows behind me down to Bordeaux, France. They knocked the heck out of a couple aerodromes down in Bordeaux. On the way back, I had problems. What happened with the first batch of Mustangs that arrived in England? Evidently, they didn't have spark plugs. The aircraft arrived in England without spark plugs. So then the authorities decided to use Spitfire plugs. Well, the American-built Rolls-Royce engine evidently was not compatible with the British-made spark plugs. On the first Berlin mission we had, we lost 2 guys. Their engine quit on the way back from Berlin. And of course, I was the victim. And so I had to crash land about 25 kilometers south of Le Havre. The Germans came after me and I ran away from them into a forest. They came in the forest and I still remember, they were yapping in German. I didn't understand anything about German, but probably were saying, you better give up, we're going to kill you, something like that. I finally came out from the forest and I hit the road. For 5 days, I wandered all over the place, and I had an injured shoulder, by the way. I began to eat grass, dandelions I found in the countryside, and drinking water from running creeks. 5 days later, I made contact with the resistance. But I had a problem. The Frenchman who spoke perfect English, he said, Stefan, you parlez Anglais with an accent. He said, where were you born? So I told him, I was born in Athens and I went to America. But would you believe that they did not really trust me by saying that? Because the Germans, during the war, I don't know if you people are aware of this here, the Gestapo recruited American-born youngsters who spoke German because from their family. What did they did? They sent them to Germany to really work with the Gestapo. It was those fellows who penetrated the OSS, our own people. And of course, they were told that be careful if you go down in France because the Germans have imitators and so on. Anyway, I spent 6 months in occupied France and I lived in 16 different houses in Paris for 6 months. Thank God that I had learned French in high school in Athens. But when I came here, I said, hey, they don't speak French in America. They speak English. So I devoted myself to learn English and I dropped the French. But it really came handy when I was in occupied Paris. When the French found out that I spoke the French, my God, le grec américain parle français, one of my friends said. So they took me out and the Germans in the meantime had begun to evacuate Paris at the time I was there. And we did some sabotaging. I went out with the guys one night and we put spikes on the road. Of course, now at night, the Germans and even the French, they did not use their strong lights, They had the dim lights there. So what we did to sabotage the German convoys as they were evacuating France, we put spikes like a small pyramid like that, but sharp. You could really cut your hands, if you touch that at the top. We put it on the road around the bend, so they would have time to see, as they made the turn. And my God, I was in an expedition one night where we intercepted a convoy with stolen French property going to Germany. The first rock that hit the spike we had put around the bend was completely destroyed. The second truck collided with the first one, fire began, and then that's where we opened up fire. How many I killed that night, I have no idea. But I want you to know, I got the French Croix de Guerre with the Silver Star from General de Gaulle and 2 kisses. And another point here, about 2 years ago, I got a letter from the French ambassador in Washington saying that, "Dear Colonel Pisanos, the government in Paris has discovered that you contributed immensely for our liberation, and they have awarded you the Legion of Honor, the highest French decoration." And my God, they came to San Diego and presented to me the decoration at the museum, our museum in San Diego. So I have 2 from the French, several from about 5 DFCs from the US, and other decorations, Vietnam and what have you. But I want you to know that it was really wonderful serving this country. I spent 30 years in the Air Force, enjoyed every bit of it. I had been a test pilot at Wright Field. We tested all the German aircraft we had captured. I did the testing on the YP-80 at Murak Lake. I was checked out by Tony Lavier, the Lackey test pilot, and old Chuck Yeager joined us later on, and old Bud Anderson, where his aircraft is marked right here. It is really a pleasure being here tonight, talking to this wonderful group. And I want to thank you for receiving me. Thank you. Any questions? Any questions?
Yes, sir. Did you work long enough under Don Blakesley, the commander of the 4th Fighter Group, long enough to give us an impression about it?
Absolutely, close to 2 years. Don Blakesley, the greatest aerial commander we had during the war. He had over 800 hours operational time. A tremendous individual. Even when I met Adolf Galland, he said, "Oh, Blakesley? Oh, we knew him very well in the Luftwaffe." The Luftwaffe really respected Don Blakesley. He was the greatest, to my estimation, and perhaps many of my friends agree with me. Don Blakesley was the greatest aerial commander during World War II. He shot down 15 or 17 enemy aircraft. A great commander. And of course, he passed away, and I missed the guy. When I learned that he had passed away, it was too late. I wanted to go down to Florida where he lived and attend the funeral, but I miss him. Anywhere? Anyone else? Any other questions?
Not really a question, but I'm sure you've heard the term the greatest generation. And I'd like to say, on behalf of all of us, as you being a member of the greatest generation, if it wasn't for people like you, we wouldn't be experiencing the freedom that we have today, and we'd have a much different world than we have. So God bless you, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Let me add something to what my friend said here. It is the United States of America that honestly I have in my heart. And I will never forget the day I became a US citizen in London, England. It was the 3rd of May, 1943. And they had a special emissary who came from Washington to naturalize 6 of us in London, England. And I happened to be the first one. You have no idea the celebration we had at our fighter base that night. They learned about the episode, of course, and when I returned to my base, the 4th Fighter Group, by the way, was the organization the 3 American Eagle squadrons, all of us flying Spitfires in the Royal Air Force. When we transfer over to the Army Air Force, all of us transfer at the same time. Anyway, when I returned to my base after I had become a U.S. citizen, there was a big sign on the bar, at the top of the bar. Tonight, all drinks are on Steve Pisanos, American. You know what my bill was? With the Officers Club gave me the bill the next day? Close to $300. It was worth it though. We had fighter pilots from the nearby bases, to come up and celebrate, and I shook hands with more guys than anything that night. But it was worth it. It was worth it. Any other questions about the war or anything else? I didn't get that. Okay. I took part in 110 missions, starting with the Spitfire, the P-47, then this little fellow right here. And we did the first mission that we really began to do against the Germans was strafing. I strafed more locomotives than perhaps anyone in my group. And then, of course, when we got the Mustang, things changed because the boys were thinking about Berlin. And my God, we got to Berlin. I was on the first escort mission to Berlin. And as I said earlier, when I met Adolf Galland, he said, I was meeting with the Marshal in Berlin. And when we were told that the Americans have arrived with their B-17s escorted by fighters, I told the Marshal, we are kaput. This is what Galland told me when he visited America, by the way, and I met him. Any other questions? Excuse me, I didn't get that. Oh, yeah, okay. This is about it. We had gone on an escort with the Mustangs, and my God, we were flying at about 28,000 feet, and at about 32,000 feet, the Luftwaffe was waiting for us. We got into a dogfight there, and it was unbelievable. I had a guy got on my tail, but I was able to really outmaneuver the guy, and I sat him down. Then another guy jumped on me, and I thought this was it, but I had some friends waiting for me, the clouds below me. So I dove into the clouds, and that's how I got away from this German. When I came out, of course, I was below the deck there, and that's how I saved my neck. Any other questions?
So you indicated that you were a test pilot through the YP-80?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Compare those planes flying the German jet versus the U.S.?
Yes. When I came back from overseas, I was assigned to right field because my buddy, Don Gentili, was also a test pilot there. The test pilot school we have today at Edwards was originally at Wright Field. So I went through the test pilot school, and of course at Wright Field we had the ME-109, the FW-190, the Japanese Zero, and the ME-262. We flew those aircraft. We wanted to find out what the Germans had that we didn't have. And my God, our aircraft, especially this fellow right here to my right, they were really tremendous aircraft. And I think this is why we destroy the Luftwaffe with this aircraft right here. The German aircraft, were really well built and strong like our own aircraft. But the Japanese, I flew the Zero also at Wright Field. The Japanese aircraft were made from newspapers. The engineers, were so not mad at us, but always, would follow us to make sure that we stop at the right spot there to jump in the cockpit. He said, well, no, don't stop here because you're going to buckle the thing. So the Japanese aircraft were really made poorly. But the Germans, the British, and the American aircraft, especially this fellow right here, well, tremendous. And as you know, it was this aircraft, I was not on that mission because I was down in France. This aircraft, the 4th Fighter Group, flew from England to Berlin to the Soviet Union. The only mission that was flown, that far. And it was this aircraft right here. Tremendous machine. Any other questions?
How did the ME-262 compare to the Y-P-80?
The P-80 was really a good aircraft, but it didn't have, enough fuel to take you to a distance. I flew a P-80 out of Edwards Air Force Base, Muroc Lake at the time, to Wright Field. And I had to land in Oklahoma to get some fuel. And the Germans, they had some good endurance. They had enough tanks, to carry enough fuel. Because, of course, what Hitler, all the German guys had in mind, England. We have to go to England if we were going to really cause damage over England. But the German aircraft were really good aircraft. There's no question about that. They knew what they were doing. Any other question?
Where were you on D-Day?
D-Day? With the French resistance in Paris. Yeah. I went down the 5th of March, 1944. And of course, when I told my French friends, I said, I need to get back to London, how to... Oh, he said, Stefan, he said, it's not possible. It's not possible. Because, at that time, the OSS was used tremendously, in cooperation with the French. And they didn't have time, to pick up a downed pilot to send him back to England. But I was desperately wanted to go back, and get part in the fight. So I had to wait when Paris was liberated. And what a day, that day. You have no idea. The people came out. Women were wearing their best dresses. They were carrying flowers. And an army major got me on his jeep there. And you should have seen, the celebration. They would give us bottles of wine, flowers all over our jeep. The jeep I was riding in the back was loaded with flowers. The French people were so happy, that finally they got liberated. Any other questions?
Tell us about the time when the Gestapo knocked on your door in the middle of the night.
Oh, okay. Somebody, let me answer this question here. I was staying in a house on the 5th floor with an Englishman. Scott was his name, and I used to call the guy Scotty. We were told by the landlord to be careful. Don't let us be seen by people outside that apartment on the 5th floor. So at daytime, we didn't really go out to the balcony. Then both of us, the Englishman and myself, would sleep on the same bed. And the landlord, said that, please wear your clothes except your shoes. And if anybody knocks on the door at night, because the Gestapo, was visiting different houses looking for downed aviators, English or Americans. So the guy said, if anybody, he says, go out in the balcony. So my God, about 2 o'clock in the morning, knock on the door. Après la porte, open the door. Oh my God, I said, Scotty. I pushed my friend, Scotty. I said, somebody at the door. Let's get out on the balcony. So my God, we had our clothes on. The only thing we put on were our shoes. We got in the balcony, and then we closed the balcony, the door. I said, wait a minute, Scotty. Only if they are stupid, they're not going to come to the balcony. So what we did, we jumped from one balcony. In France, the balconies are not too far apart. My God, we had to jump on it and get to the other balcony. We arrived on the third balcony, third apartment house, when the Gestapo guys opened the door looking for someone, in the balcony. And I remember, this guy, whether he was a Frenchman or a German, I don't know, but he said, rien ici, nothing here. They left. Then the landlord, of course, he was so goddamn afraid that they had to come to the balcony to look for us. But he was so happy, though, when he found out that we were 2 apartments down from his house. So it was then when he notified the resistance, and some agents came up. They picked up Scotty and myself, and we were taken away. I don't know where Scotty went, and I lost him, and I never, of course, got in touch with him. They moved me to another house. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a copy of your book here, and it shows you crashing standing on the wing.
Yes. Okay. We had gone down to Bordeaux. This is the mission, my last mission I flew on the 5th of March, 1944. Escort B-24s, not B-17s, B-24s down to Bordeaux. We got into a fight. I got my 9th and 10th victory over Bordeaux. On the way back, my engine began to act funny. But let me add something here. When we got the Mustang, they arrived in England without spark plugs. So they began to use Spitfire plugs. On the first Berlin mission we had, escorting B-17s to Berlin with the Mustang, we lost 2 guys in the 4th Fighter Group. Then they realized, the reason was that we were using Spitfire plugs because the aircraft arrived in England without spark plugs. Evidently, Champion or whoever was making the spark plug did not have the plugs ready. Anyway, then the General Aspatch and Doolittle got so mad, and they told Washington, unless we get American-built spark plugs, we're not going to fly the aircraft. My God, they expedited, and they brought the decent spark plugs, and from then on, we didn't have any problems. But that's what really brought me down. I was coming back from Bordeaux, and my engine over Le Mans, acted so funny, and I knew, I said, something wrong with the goddamn spark plugs. So as I came closer to Le Havre, the engine quit entirely, and I had to put it down. Exactly the way the book shows it. Well, when I had the engine problem over Le Mans, I said, if it's going to quit, I better not bail out at high altitude. The intelligence officers prohibited us from bailing out in high altitude because the Germans in France at that time were shooting at anybody coming. You know how many guys, B-17 crew members we lost because the young fellows, were jumping at high altitude. So while they were coming down, the Germans were practicing with their machine guns, killing almost everybody. And that, of course, so then the rule came out from Fighter Command. If you have to jump, do it at about 2,000 feet. Okay, so here I am now. My engine was acting funny. And as I was coming up over Le Havre, about 22,000 feet, I felt the goddamn thing something is going to do to me. So my God, all of a sudden, bang. Yeah, just completely stopped. The plugs evidently were filed up or so, and so I slowly brought the thing down, and I said, I'm not going to bail out at high altitude because the Germans in France, would have really fired at me. So being scared, I stayed with the aircraft at about 2,000 feet. So at 2,000 feet, I said, will be perfect, I released the canopy, I unbuckled myself, and then I stood up. And as I stood up, I noticed I had forgotten to plug the plug from the dickey to the Mae West. And the plug was hanging down. So as I stood up there, the plug. I tried to really loosen up the plug. I sat down back in the cockpit and moved it left and right, back and forth, everything. And nothing. So finally I got it loose. I stepped out on the wing and I was just ready to go. And thank God that I looked up ahead. I can see the cows in the field. I said, so I stood right there, and that's exactly Taylor, the artist, designed that. Perfect. That's exactly what happened to me. I stood right. I wanted to get back in the cockpit, but I was afraid I might disturb the stick. I was so close to the ground. So I stood right there, hoping that, things will work out. And that's exactly what happened. Thank you. A pleasure to be here. Thank you.